Something I really wanted to talk to you about is Cambodia.
Mm.
Because I find Cambodia to be such an interesting country. And you said you're making a documentary about it.
Yeah, so we're making a documentary about the killing fields in Cambodia and about the Khmer Rouge genocide. And it's pretty fascinating, man, the deeper you sort of look into it. So Cambodia, between the years 1975 and 1979, went through an extermination of about a third of the population, a few million people, upwards of like 2 million people, because there was a revolution by a group called the Khmer Rouge, who were communists led by a man named Pol Pot. And before that, they were like a monarchy. They had Prince Sihanouk, who was in charge, and there was the Vietnam War that was going on between obviously Vietnam and the United States. And then you've got the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which comes through parts of Cambodia. And Cambodia were in this funny position where Prince Sihanouk was trying to sort of keep it cool with the United States and Vietnam. And then he they kind of messed up when when America bombed the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And then America also bombed Laos a bunch as well. And it was basically a very chaotic time where America was bombing a lot of countries in that region of the world. And it actually allowed for a lot of radicalization in Cambodia, because the Khmer Rouge, similar to like sort of Che Guevara and Castro in Cuba, they were very like anti-imperialist, anti-American. They were working with like the Chinese Communist Party and the communists in Vietnam and everything. And when America was bombing Laos and bombing Cambodia during the Nixon-Kissinger administration, they were radicalizing like no tomorrow. They were getting like thousands and thousands of these people from like the villages in Cambodia to join up with the Khmer Rouge and come and fight against the imperial Americans and overthrow the monarchy. So that ended up happening. And what we're doing with the documentary is we've got a guy who I know in Cambodia who's lived there his whole life, and he was born in 1979, just after the Khmer Rouge. And he kind of tells the story from the Cambodian perspective and a little bit about his family and everything. And it's funny because when the Khmer Rouge marched into Phnom Penh, which is the capital, all of the people were out there clapping and so happy because, you know, they thought that the war was over, because it was after this huge civil war between the prince's troops and the monarchy troops and the revolutionaries, and they thought the war was over and it was going to be this time of peace. But then just straight away, man, the killing started. And then
so the revolutionaries won the civil war.
Yeah, the revolutionaries won, and they overthrew, and they came to power in Cambodia, the communists.
And so people thought it was going to be a time of peace.
Yeah,
right away they started targeting people who
exactly.
were like smart, right?
Yeah. So they thought it was going to be a time of peace, because obviously with the communist rhetoric a lot of the time is like, you know, power to the people. We're from the sort of hills and we're not going to be sort of subordinate to these Americans who are bombing us. And obviously then they get in, and they're a guerrilla warfare army. So they spent their time over the years in like the hills and just becoming more and more and more and more radicalized. And then eventually they come to power, and, you know, they're pretty ruthless sort of people. But, you know, Pol Pot himself went to a French sort of university. He went to a university in Paris, and he was born into like sort of like a noble family in Cambodia. So he wasn't from the countryside, but, you know, he's spoken on behalf of those people, as is normally the case. But yeah, when they came to power, they started targeting anyone who was educated, because obviously the communist, like the Marxist doctrine suggests that it's like the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat, and they're all the proletariat coming from the country. And then anybody who had glasses, anybody who had long hair, anybody who was like, anybody who had glasses, anybody who was educated, like a teacher or a doctor or anything like that, anybody who was like a remotely wealthy peasant, they just rounded them up and started killing them. And then obviously the pathology of a movement like that runs deep, and it's like this culture of fear, where if you sort of don't do what you're told, and if you're not a good revolutionary, then you'll be killed. So then you've got all of these people who are sort of a part of the Khmer Rouge, or just civilians who know that human life is so cheap that if they don't do exactly what they're told, and if they don't act like they're for the revolution 100%, and if there's even a remote inkling that they're conspiring against the Red Guard, or like the the Khmer Rouge, they'll be killed straight away. And you've got Tuol Sleng Prison, which was the prison where we filmed at. We interviewed two of the final survivors in their 90s of the Khmer Rouge. This prison had, I'm going to butcher the numbers, but I think it was something like in the region of like 13,000 prisoners. It might have even been tens of thousands. The number escapes me. Might have even been like 40,000. I can't quite remember, but there was 12 survivors. 12 survivors out of all of them. And
so you interviewed two of the final.
We interviewed one from that prison and then one from a that was in a concentration camp up in Siem Reap, which is in the north. But we interviewed one of the guys from that prison. And you walk in there and it's basically just rows and rows and rows of photos because they photographed everybody that came in. And it's just people with like a number or whatever. Little children, babies, women, men, and they all have this look on their face of, I'm about to die. Yeah, it's over for me. Because no one survived. They'd keep them there, they'd interrogate them for a little while, they'd torture them and get them to admit to conspiring against the revolution, and then they'd take them to the killing fields, which is another haunting, harrowing place in Phnom Penh. They'd drive them there, and they might keep them for a few days to mentally mess with them a little bit, and they'd play all of this Cambodian propaganda music from the speakers, and then they'd take them out into the fields and kill them. And there's a tree that's particularly harrowing, because there's still bones in the ground and stuff, and you can see bones like going up in the ground. You walk into the killing fields, and there's this like Eiffel Tower temple-looking thing with all of the skulls of the people that were killed in the killing fields, all labelled, man, woman, child, how they were killed, and all of the murder weapons are there as well. And there's this tree that you can go to along the way where they used to kill like children, and they'd bring the mothers with their children there. They'd rip the babies out of the mother's hands and then beat them against the tree, throw them into this ditch, and kill them. And yeah, we got a little bit of a tour around there, and then spoke to the guy at the prison as well and looked at his old cell and asked him about torture techniques and everything, but pretty depraved stuff.
Wow. Yeah, I went there probably 10 years ago, and I remember how haunting that place was. That really impacted me because that wasn't that long ago. Like, I've been to Auschwitz and Hiroshima and different places where incredible trauma has happened, but that felt more like a museum, where this really felt like, I mean, like you said, there's literally bones right there like you can bend over and pick up some guy's shirt. Like they haven't cleaned it up yet. I remember walking through the field and finding a jawbone, and it's just wild. You can pick it up, and like they haven't roped it off or cleaned it up yet. I guess there were so many bodies that they couldn't clean it up. It's so insane that it doesn't register as real. Like when you see that mountain of skulls, it almost seems like an Indiana Jones ride at Disneyland. But then you remind yourself, this is real. And it's crazy because a lot of people don't even know about it, and it wasn't that long ago. So it's really great that you're making this documentary. Do you see any similarities between that revolution and things that are happening in the West?
Not particularly. I think that we're in a new era of revolution at the moment, but absolutely you see the oppression narrative. I think that's something that's just like a byproduct of Marxism that's infiltrated pretty much most cultures. But today you see a lot of, black versus white, man versus woman, gay versus straight, trans versus non-trans, able-bodied, and all of these more sort of cultural aspects. But when you look at Cambodia, for example, you can understand the actual effects that these totalitarian communist societies had, because like I said, there's this insidious culture of fear as well, where once the revolutionaries take over, it just pathologizes and just spreads, and it's like just this cancer. Luckily, in our societies, we do have checks and balances in place. In those societies, it was kind of like the strongest survives, the more powerful guys will come in. They're backed by the Chinese, they're backed by the Vietnamese. So in Western cultures, I don't think we have to worry as much about a communist revolution necessarily. But certainly the ideas are there. There's the seed bed of ideas are there, and certainly in terms of our cultural revolution, that is where we're full steam ahead with the cultural revolution. But the political revolution, I'm not too sure. I think that that's to be played out.